situation is I'm going to tell you about people who paid the ultimate price, and it's difficult for me to accept applause because I'm an agent. I'm telling you what they lived through. They deserve the applause of people who lived through what you're going to hear about. Very difficult for me to get a group of people your age together and to tell you what happened. When I started teaching, I couldn't believe that kids didn't know who we were fighting against in World War II. I'm talking about junior high school and high school kids. So I'm going to give you a little piece of history that there are people busy denying. They say it never happened, so I say I saw it. The people in the camp when I came in were screaming at me, it was Alleman Zugan, you got to tell everybody. They wanted the world to know. This is the first thing they asked for. That I should tell, that we should tell everybody. They screamed it at the American soldiers. But let me start with what my youth was like with war hanging over our head. We knew that Hitler was a very bad guy. I lived in a Jewish neighborhood with Jewish friends. We all knew that Hitler was killing us. Anything you hear otherwise just isn't true. We just knew it. Refugees were coming in, and they were telling us what was happening in Europe, and they told us how the soldiers came in and grabbed their kids and shot one in front of them. And this is America. We couldn't believe it. We heard it, they said it, we couldn't believe it. But later we saw it, and we still couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it so much that for 50 years, after I went into that camp, I couldn't believe it. I was there, I saw it, my mind wiped it clean. And it wasn't just me. I go to the VA now, and I used to meet a lot more guys because we're going about the rate of 2,000 a day. But it was common for people that the post-traumatic stress disorder, you just wipe it out. It never happened. One of the persons treating me in the VA said to me, "You were in the 42nd." I said, "No, I was with the tank destroyers, and we were attached to the 42nd. He said, "Well, the 42nd went into Dachau. Didn't they clean it up?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, if you were in the 42nd on April 29th, 1944, you were in Dachau." And I had no memory of it. Since then, under treatment and meeting with other guys and going to meetings, a lot has come back. But it hasn't come back to me in a linear manner. In other words, I can't say, this is what I did, and then I did this, and then I did this. It comes back to me in spots, like coming attractions in a movie. Just to declare something that happened. Let me take you back to Brooklyn, New York, Vernon Avenue. Punch bowl, two-hand touch. Those were the important things of life. We heard that there was trouble in Europe, and we heard names like Czechoslovakia. Where the hell did that name come from to a bunch of Brooklyn kids? And then we heard Anschluss, and I still remember the names. Speaking to my friends, what does that mean? And our teachers explaining it to us. The important thing about those days is that we knew that something was happening. I don't want to discuss that any further, that particular thing, because then it becomes political. I just want to tell you what I saw and what happened to me. We were playing, a bunch of kids and I were playing two-hand touch in the street. That's a form of football. And when the game was over, my sister, who had a street-level apartment where we were playing in Brooklyn streets, you know, sidewalks and gutters, my sister invited us all in, as was her habit, to have coffee and cookies after the game. There was a Yankee Dodger football game on the radio. And nobody wanted to miss that because, you know, football, who's going to miss that? So after the game was over, we went into my sister's house where she had a radio that was this high and that wide, and had the dials, and you could hear the whistles on until you got in. We finally got the football game in, and we all sat around and watched that football game on the radio. It happens. You know, we were there betting, and it was a style. While we're watching the game, and it was fascinating, those announcers were great, they made you see it. And while we were watching the game, and we hear the announcer, and he's on the 5, he's on the 15, down to the 25, beep. We interrupt this program to announce that the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor. We didn't know what Pearl Harbor was. We didn't know why the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. But what we did know is our lives would absolutely change. Our brothers had already been registered for the draft. A lot of people had been working for war industries because we were providing material. You've read about the Lend-Lease program. We were providing war material for Russia, France, England. So we had a feeling for the war, but now we're in it. Roosevelt made that famous speech of, I'll never forget it, I just can't remember. He made that famous speech where he said, I will not send you, well anyway, he made a famous speech. And we knew immediately that we were at war. We were all expecting it. We knew the world was in that shape. And the next day, tons of kids, 18, 19, 20, ran down to enlist. Anybody with a draft card went down and they asked for immediate induction. In a couple, at the same time when I made that broadcast, they said, all military personnel report to your post immediately. All officers report to here and here. All those above the rank that were giving out military instructions over the radio, interrupting the football game. A dramatic, terrible thing was happening to America. And so the war was on. There were parades in the streets, support our soldiers, big banners giving all the names from all the kids on the block that were already in service. It was the thing of life. You got up, what's happening in the war. My brother joined immediately. He joined the Marines. And just to skip over a couple of months, he was in the first engagement with the enemy. He was on Guadalcanal. You may have seen stories of Guadalcanal. It was terrible. He was there, and we started seeing casualty lists in our papers. First thing you did, everybody went down, got the paper, and looked for somebody they didn't know. I'm just saying that, but it was a tragic thing to have to do every day. My brother's name was Max KAPLAN. That's like John Smith in American. And every day they got up and they found a Max KAPLAN who had been killed on Guadalcanal. And every day they had to worry. It gets me. Every day they had to worry is that their son. Just to give you an idea of what it was like. War sounds so brave. It's really terrible. I was dying to go to war, but I was only 17. I lost all interest in high school. I didn't give a damn about it even. I wanted to get into the war. I came home to my mother, who already had a son now. Told her, Mom, I'm joining. I need your signature. She said, let me say it in Yiddish. Then I'll translate. She said, "Ich have ein off of fire. I got one in the fire. I don't need two." I couldn't go in, but I did. I went down to the draft board where I did not need a birth certificate, and I signed up for the draft. And where I said the age, I put down 18, immediate induction requested. I checked that part, and in 3 weeks I was in the Army. My mother was furious, but I did what I had to do. I got into the Army, I took my basic training, and in no time, I was at the Brooklyn Piers, you know where that is, on Columbia Street, standing there in the middle of the night in the rain with Red Cross people giving me donuts, and standing in line and somebody going, and we started to march up a ship. And I got onto that ship knowing this is it. My basic training is over. We drove in from Florida by railroad. That's where my basic training was, and now they're walking me through my town, Brooklyn, onto a ship. And I remember that ship leaving the harbor, and I was looking at the Statue of Liberty, who seemed to be running away from me. I went that way and I went that way. And that symbolism has never left me. Because I never got out of Brooklyn. I never went out of Brooklyn. And now all of a sudden I'm carrying 90 pounds of junk on my back, and I'm saying goodbye to America. And I'm not saying that as my experience. What I'm telling you is the experience I had that was the same as 15 million other kids, and that's a literal number. There were 15 million guys in that thing. And we sailed away, and now we're soldiers. We had 3 months of basic training, or less. And now we're what the world would call soldiers, except we didn't have our gun yet. Army didn't have enough guns to go around. So we were on that ship, and we were told we would get our weapons once we hit Europe. This was already after the invasion. I was a latecomer to the war. I wasn't, although I landed at Normandy, that part of the fighting was already over. We got into Normandy. We unloaded from the ships. On the trip overseas, on the tankers, we were building one a week or something. Our production went into full gear. We were knocking out transportation of vehicles for soldiers to be poured into Europe. And I went overseas on a former luxury liner, the SS Brazil. It was built to accommodate 600 luxury passengers. We were over 2,000 kids on that boat. Our accommodation was a canvas bed like this that's hanging on 2 poles, 4 up. You had to climb up to get into yours. You could only sleep in it 1 night out of 3 because they didn't have enough beds, so they triple berthed us. And it's the Army. You just do what you're told and you accept it. You know, you complain, you bitch, but you accept it. But it's all part of becoming a soldier. When we got to, we had 2 encounters with submarines, and I remember them rolling tin cans off our ship, depth charges. And when that depth charge exploded, meaning to hurt the submarines, it shook our boat. You wouldn't believe it. We said, who fired that? You know, whose side are we on? All part of the adventure. We got into Europe, and we were bused. They had buses to take us across the beach, the Omaha beach. You know, the beaches. I don't know what I saw. When you're a baby soldier, you're the dumbest thing on legs. I mean, nobody knows anything. They don't even bother talking to you. This means that way. An amazing thing, you can hear guns roaring that way, and a go, and you go. It's like nuts. But that's what training is. We crossed Omaha Beach where we saw the remnants of the tanks and other vehicles and the stuff you see in the movies when they show that part of it. There was no fighting there at that time. We had already secured it evidently years ago. I mean, I got there 44, I think. Omaha Beach was secured in 40, I don't know, I forget the numbers. But there was no danger there. Every now and then a plane flew over, a German plane, and did a little machine gun fire, did some strafing and went away. They evidently knew, I don't know. I didn't know what happened when it was happening. Now 50 years, this many, 70 years later, I sure don't know what was happening. But I remember that there was no fear at that point. We were like looking at a movie. Look at that, a burned out tank. But we never had one of my neighborhood. And then we went into an empty building that was made out of stone, no more windows in it. Where there should have been windows, there were just openings. We were told, throw your stuff on the floor, lay down and get yourself a night's sleep. That's what we did. We threw our stuff down, we lay down. We woke up and we were told we had to go in and get rifles. And one line at a time went in and they gave us a rifle that was covered with the grease. And we sat there cleaning our rifles, waiting to be assigned to different outfits. While we were there cleaning our rifles, the captain got up on a stand and he gave us advice. He said, you're going to have to take care of yourself, kids. Mama's not here, Papa's not here, nobody gives a shit. This was a captain in the army. He said, the only one that really cares for you is you. Take care. Do what you're told and don't be wise guys, but take care of yourself. Keep your gun at all times. I remember him because they almost pulled him down. He wasn't doing this because the Army asked him to. He was already, had seen a lot of combat and he was nuts. But he had a message to give us that resonated with me. Next thing I know, we were on cattle cars, or were called 40 and 8s. It was built, they were not military vehicles, they were civilian vehicles. They were railroad trains, and each car was built to accommodate 40 humans or 8 horses. That's how we got the name 40 and 8s. And with that, we came through France into Alsace-Lorraine. It's a pleasure ride, nothing happening. Kids coming up every time we stopped with their hands out for something to give it. And then we came into the staging area where they called your name, and over there, Kaplan over here, Schwartz over here, Merkel over here. And lines began to form. And then those lines were called out, Line A. They went on a series of trucks. And from that staging area, we went to our combat outfits. I went to the 692nd Tank Destroyers. These poor guys had fought their way up from Africa, and they needed a lot of replacements because they had a lot of losses. I was one of their replacements. Another truck brought me to an area where I saw a German soldier sitting on a bench outside, half naked. I saw a couple of American soldiers walking around, and somebody came and brought me in. We came and there was a captain. We saluted. He said, no more saluting. That's over. You don't have to tell the enemy that I'm an officer, because they want to kill officers, right? So don't salute me again. Yes, sir. And Captain Floria asked who would rather not go into a frontline combat outfit. And some guys raised their hand. I didn't. I was hot. I wanted to go in and pay back a little. I was a Jewish kid. They were killing other Jewish kids. That's all my parents spoke about, because in those days everybody had family in Germany or in Poland, and they knew that Europe was just one big fire and they were throwing us in. Anyway, my captain, when I told my captain I wanted a combat outfit, just pointed that way. And quite a few guys did. It wasn't just me, you know, we were still romantic about war. And now I came into my combat outfit. These guys, as I said, were tough. They fought their way up from Africa. They were terrific guys. Like, every one of them could have been my big brother or my father. They were old men, you know, they were 25. And I was now a soldier in a combat outfit with a real gun. And when I got to my captain, who appeared there again, he looked at my record and he said, "Heavy weapons, you're a machine gunner. Get up there." One vehicle out of 4 had a 50 caliber machine gun on it. That's a bullet this big in that round. I never saw one before in my life. I told the captain, I took no training on this. He said, "Start training yourself, son. You're a machine gunner." What happened was, I have pictures of the tank here. The tank is built like this, and on top is the machine gun. So the average passenger in that tank had a wall of armor up to here. You wanted to get out, you had to stand up and climb out. But the machine gunner had his machine gun here, nothing here, just a machine gun. And the tank was only empty, a belly button. The rest of you was exposed. That's why the job was over. Because the guy who had the job, he decided he's going to change careers. So I was given the promotion, and he was down here. The assistant gunner was the guy that was the gunner before. Everybody considered that a promotion when they're not the one they're shooting at, you'll be behind armor, that's a big promotion. So he was down here. His job was to feed the ammunition into my machine gun so that I could keep going if I had to, and he kept at it. It always amazed me that I was in the combat outfit for a couple of days, and I made private already. I got my promotion, some promotion. And then we went into the combat areas. In the combat areas, I still didn't know what was going on. I just knew we had to do what you told. Bring yourself, get broadside with this guy, get this, we kept all hand signals. I never knew what was happening, and nobody did, except our officers, and they knew well. Now, an interesting thing, I'm fluent in the Yiddish language. That's a language that doesn't have a country. It's just a language that was born out of being in many countries. When I came into my outfit, one of their big problems was getting a place to sleep at night. They could sleep outside on on the field, but who the hell wants that? We had all the equipment for it, but nobody wants to sleep on the field. You could sleep in a tank or in a vehicle, but that's a target. You know, when an enemy observer picks up his glasses and he sees an American tank standing there, he's not going to wait for you to get up. They fire. So, what these men were doing was going to German homes and telling them that they wanted lodging for the night. But how do you tell somebody when they don't speak English and you don't speak German? Difficult. Yiddish is akin to German. So when I came in, I saw them arguing with the inhabitants whose home they wanted to take over, and that's legal by the rules of war. I could say to them, "Wir sind amerikanische Soldaten." We're American soldiers. Wie viele Betten haben Sie? How many beds you got? 17 years old. Wie viele Betten haben Sie? How many beds you got? 7 Betten? 7 beds? Ja. 7 amerikanische Soldaten do schlafen. Wo Mama and Papa schlafen? House. Where's Mama and Papa going to sleep? Where are my children going to sleep? With your neighbors. But just get out now. Tough as that, because this was the enemy. We had been shot at by them. We had heard a lot of stories as we traveled through that involved them. But we were good guys. We really didn't mistreat them. We wanted a place to sleep at night. Either they or we were going to sleep outside, and we had guns. That was a price of admission. However, for me, it was a big advancement amongst my peers, because instead of them arguing, "God damn son of a bitch, I said get out of here." But I could say to them, "House." They say, "I have children." I say, "We have American telegraphs and telephones that are with us." We learned that expression from the Germans. Once you say that, Amerikanische telephone and telegraph, everybody knows they got to get out. They don't argue with you. We have communications in, and they got out. What made it easier? And my peers kept running to me. "Tell that son of a bitch we want some eggs." You know, if you're on a farm, you go up to a farm, I could tell them, "Wir wollen Eier, ich hab amerikanische Geld. I want eggs, we have American money for you." And they always say, "But you'll pay me." I said, "Sure." Sometimes we did. A guy would come by with 4 eggs, and somebody else would follow him and come back with 25 eggs for us. The only food we had was in a can. It was disgusting. So eggs made disgusting taste a lot better. I'm trying to give you an idea of my relationship with my fellow soldiers. Baby soldier, not their friend. They didn't know me, I didn't know them. But that business of being able to talk German, to talk to Germans through my Yiddish became very, very important to Camp Island. Because to skip over a lot of time. Of course, unbeknownst to me, because I'm a baby soldier, my colonel was ordered to go in with a party to escort the 42nd Infantry Division into Dachau. I never heard that. I was just doing my business. My friends, we didn't know what was going on, but we just knew that we were going to join the 42nd. We pack up, we get in, we joined the 42nd, and it was nothing. For a couple of days, we're sitting and eating and talking, and then behind the scenes, where I didn't know, Dachau was in the first German concentration camp. It was infamous, it was horrible, and everybody knew it. It was filled with Jewish prisoners, a very heavy Jewish population. They needed somebody to talk to the Jews. You had to say to them, you may not eat, it'll kill you. And it did. So if they took a Hershey bar, we had to tell them, we had to give them instructions for exiting the camp, for whatever it was. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know this was going on. All I knew was I was in the camp, I was speaking Yiddish to some of them. Now what happened was, my colonel knew the situation we were entering. The average soldier didn't. We didn't know what the hell this one would be. So my colonel knew he had to get a Jew to accompany him. So he called my captain, who was Jewish. His name was Ralph Floria, and that don't sound like Schwartz. So nobody could figure out that Ralph. What happened was, he was a Spanish Jew. He did not speak Yiddish. And once he got into the camp, I found out what they wanted him for. He knew that a mistake was being made. But he remembered that he had a Jewish kid that was getting beds from the Germans. So somebody came back for me. I don't even remember who it was. I got into the Jeep, we drove down, and he took me to Dachau. The camp had not been ended yet by the American forces, maybe one or two, but not by a bunch. When I got there, because I was going to be interpreter and he wanted to introduce me, my captain pulled me up to the gates of Dachau. I could look through it and I saw American officers speaking with German officers. They were making their deal on how the camp would be. You know, you had thousands of people in it. The Germans did everything they could to stall. I want to go back to something. The night before this is happening, the night before we entered Dachau, we were in Munich. Now, I was a machine gunner. I heard machine gun fire, and I could identify it as German machine gun fire. And I went to my captain. He said, I don't know who the hell that is. And it was big talk. It was big stuff in the neighborhood, you know. Like, what's going on? Why are they 3 miles away and we hear their fire? What's happening in there? We didn't know until later on. But anyway, now I'm standing in line with a bunch of other guys, my gun slung over my shoulder. I had a gun on my hip, a 45 caliber, because a rifle is like worthless indoors. You walk around with a rifle, you're going to hit something. With a pistol, you got more room. When we were in Germany, passing through, and we had to clean out a house, every now and then you would hear, on our radio, you would hear, this is before entering Dachau, every now and then on our radio we would hear, boom, 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 Beethoven's Fifth, boom, 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 das ist Radio Luxemburg. Das kommt amerikanische Soldaten in 15 Minuten. Boom, 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 boom. This is Radio Luxembourg, the Allied Military Government Broadcasting Company. In 15 minutes, American soldiers will arrive in your town. Boom, 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 boom. In 14 minutes, American soldiers will arrive. And they kept drumming that in. All weapons are to be laid out in front of the entrance to your building. Anybody caught with a weapon will be shot. Boom, 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 boom. White flags must be displayed. Boom, 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 boom. That alone was an experience in my head. By the time the troops got after all that boom, 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 we came in and it was a very docile group that let us come into their town. Funny, there was no fighting in town. All of contact was trying to stop us from coming in. But once we were in, it's like the authority of the German army was transferred to us. They knew how to follow orders. It was under those circumstances, right after we heard the machine gun fire, it was under those circumstances that I was picked up and told, get into the camp. He'll take you in. So 4 of us were brought into the camp. And we were taken to our group that we had to enter the camp with, where the officers already had instructions. We didn't know what. And I saw that scene of American officers talking to German officers. That, by the way, was an unbelievable scene. This wasn't movies. This wasn't movies with Nazi gear. This was a Nazi son of a bitch standing in front of me, and I had a gun, and I was aware of it, and everybody had guns, and just like a movie coming to life. We're still there. You know, as I'm talking to you, I'm still afraid to walk into that camp. I'm up to the part of the story I got to tell you about that. Finally, one of our officers, they opened the gates of Dachau, and we walked in. As a carpet of dead. There had been a lot of shooting. Those that got hit were still bleeding, still groaning, and still calling us. Just walking into a courtyard. There was a wall, and bodies were stacked up against it. I don't know how many thick, but I know an officer looked at that wall of bodies. He said to me, "How high is that?" I raised my hand, I figured, "About 7 feet, sir." Just wrote it down. I can see a wall now. When I was teaching, I walked into schools who had a wall painted up 7 feet. I could feel it in my bones. Because there were 7 feet of dead people laying, still bleeding. So it slopes down. Dead bodies cannot sustain themselves evidently because they change their movement. And it sloped down, and on the bottom was a fully clad German officer of some high rank because he was dressed like he was going to a party. You know, top uniform. I couldn't stand looking at him laying on top of my people. I grabbed him by his belt. Pulled them off the stack just so that they shouldn't contact him. Don't ask me why, but they did. We were all doing kooky things because too much. Now I have to rely on spot memories. I remember seeing a woman, an old lady. She may have been a young lady, but she looked like an old lady to me. She was screaming at me. I went to put my hand on her head to say, "Zorgzug, Nishmanda." Now I can talk to her. I said, "Zorgzug, don't worry, Mom. I'm an American soldier. I'm a Jewish boy from Brooklyn. Don't get me." And when I went to raise my hand to pat her head, she pulled away and started to scream in fear. Whoever screamed because of me. And I started speaking to her, and she reached into her garment and she pulled out a picture and she started to scream, "Where is my family?" I have a picture of her family here. find it in a little bit. In the camp, I'll find the picture in a little while. That's a moment that I'll never forget, and I always wondered, why is it so clear to me? Give me a half hour, I'll figure it out. I can remember the color of her hair like it was yesterday. I can remember the little flecks in her hair. I can remember her screaming at me. And then she gave me the picture of her family. Both ends of my kids, both ends of my family, and screaming at me. And I remember then that she didn't know what she didn't expect any response from me. There was a fence a few feet away, a metal fence. And it had been, before we got there, it had been electrically charged. And that separated one end of the camp from the other. But as I was talking to her, they broke that fence down because it was no longer charged. And a swarm of people came. And from this point on, the whole place was elbowing your way through a swarm of people. The swarm of people came and broke me from her, and it left me holding her picture of her family. And I remember that, and I can't forget it as I talk to you. I remember her telling me that they're stealing her straw. She showed me where she slept, which was on a board, 4 high. And she started like a Yiddish mama, putting the straw together so neatly so she could sleep on it. Nothing to sleep on it, but I could hold all the straw in my hands. That's all that was left. Imagine people fighting over it. They had. The next scene I remember is we got into a room that had a long alleyway, and it had 2 other rooms that narrowed into that alleyway. It was really like one big keyhole. On that side, there was garments laying separated, coats, pants, shoes. On that side, there were bodies, naked, stacked all the way up, one on top of the other, like a Korean grocery store that sells rice, and they got the bags all stacked up. That's what they were like, all stacked up and dead. A whole room full of dead people. What caught my eye forever was a woman holding a younger girl by her hand. The woman was laying on a pile, the girl was hanging over. The woman still had her hand. And that got me. Because what did that mother, and they were naked. The whole pile was naked. Their clothing was being separated for reuse. That woman holding the younger girl's hand it made me think then, and it always make me think, what did that woman have to say to that young girl? Don't worry, sweetheart. Who wants to look at you? They can look at somebody else. Don't worry, darling. Mama's getting undressed too. What do you say in a situation like that? That's what nobody understands about Dachau or any concentration. Complete and total disregard for human sensation. Total. Right down to something as basic as that. That changed me. I was going to get even. And I did my share. The next thing I owned, and by the way, there was a box of wire gold glasses. The glasses were this big, children's glasses. A whole box of the glasses laying there because that wire was gold. They didn't waste anything there for it. Take the kid, take the glasses, kill him next. When I went into the same school where I told you the war was, when I went into that school to teach, if a kid came in wearing gold wire rimmed glasses, I had to walk out and ask somebody to take over my class. It's just, it's the unbelievable in this country. Now, the next thing I hear is the northeast section of the camp. Northeast, what do I know? I'm a Brooklyn boy. Up the corner, down the block, around the corner, by the grocery store, the candy store. Northeast. But I saw the crowd going. I went after them. And as we were going along, I kept hearing people saying, the ovens, the ovens. I got there. There were ovens about this high, and there was a capo. A capo is a Jewish man who works for the Nazis, okay? And he's hated in the camp by the Nazis and by his fellow prisoners. By the time I got there, he was trying to explain to people who were all mad at him. He was trying to explain his end of the story. When he saw that I was speaking Yiddish, he ran over to me and he said, Zilze, tell them. And I asked him, what should I tell him? He said, Wemen hab ich geschossen. Who did I hurt? They came here, they were dead. I put them into the oven. I didn't hurt anybody. I saved my life, that's a holy thing. And then he said, he was wearing a gown, similar to the things they give you in a hospital, except his was dirty and filthy. He said, for everybody that I put into that oven, for every soul, I made a correct prayer. And he reached into his garment and he took this out. It was hanging on a string. He took it out and he said, I saved this. People saved what to put in it. And every time I put somebody in the oven, I say the prayer for the dead and the prayer for the dying. I'm a rabbi. He gave me that. I've been trying to find the rightful owner of it, write ads in the magazines, but again, I'm lost in them all. But anyway, that's one of the things I wanted to try hard not to forget, because that also tells you what was going on. Now again, I heard somebody saying this end of the camp or that end of the camp, and I went out, I followed them. Remember I told you, there were 36 boxcars behind the camp, or behind the barrack of the camp that I was in. You know how big a boxcar is? maybe from there to here, or maybe more. A lot of people. There were 40 boxcars that were being sent from another camp to Dachau, because the other camp didn't want to get caught with that many people, you know, who were opening up the camp. They were being sent to Dachau. They had been in those boxcars for 2 weeks. No food, no toileting, no medication, just locked in there. I didn't know that. All I knew was that there were boxcars laying there, and then we saw there was blood oozing out of them, puddles of blood like a river. What happened, that machine gunning that I heard the night before, they set up a machine gun, and they machine gunned 36 boxcars loaded with people. And then they left them there. And then we came in, we found them. That was Dachau. I went crazy. I was digging in that pile of humans. I was touching and moving and handling death and crying over them, looking for something alive. There was nothing alive. Nobody was alive. You got your head in a boxcar, and there's feet and hands and shoes, and it's all dead. You cannot be in a room full of dead people without hearing them talking. You heard it. Something happens to your head. And then there's nothing you can do. Everything you want to do, you can call your captain and get anything you want. You don't know what that will do. That they want. We left that. I remember German kids in Nazi uniforms showering me off. Somebody told them to. So what happened was the German soldiers put on prisoners' garb, and they went into the prisoners' ranks. I'll tell you a little about that later if I remember. The kids, 14, 15, were wearing the uniforms of guys who were 6 foot tall, so it was a silly looking thing. But they were the ones that were sent over to clean off the human debris from my clothing. They were showering me and cleaning me off. And I tell you, I don't know how I remember that. It's a kind of a different memory system. I see. Anyway, that was Dachau. I can't. I'm done. So that was Dachau, and I hope you got a different picture of it and understand that this is 75 years later, and it's still very, very, very significant. Hold on. I was wandering around the camp, and I see a guy standing there, German uniform, this on the side. I pulled out my gun. I said, kind of give here, no weapons. He took that off, it was on this belt, and this belt showed a spade for digging and a swastika. I'll have it here, you'll be able to look it over. It showed a spade for digging and a swastika, like it was a farming camp. Why else would you need a spade? I said to him, "Was hast du abgetan?" I could tell immediately he was a high-ranking officer. He was I have his insignia here somewhere. He was a high-ranking officer, and he figured he had a kid, you know, a baby soldier, so he's used to giving orders and getting away with stuff. I said to him, "What did you do? What did you people do?" He said to me, "Als Juden, they're all Jews." That That was his joke. I said, "Ich auch, me too." Yeah. My mother had sent me a Jewish star. I took it out and I almost shoved it through his eyeball. Ich auch. He carried this knife. Not make-believe. It's a very sharp point. He loved to slice women's asses and their breasts. That was his big joke. Oh, don't be afraid. Come and see me. That was his joke. How do I know it? Because we had to describe what other prisoners told us to the people who came into the camp to make record on it. So this was mentioned at the Nuremberg trials later on. I think I'm done. Okay. Thank you for listening. Thanks for listening. Oh, something else I want to tell you. I knew there was something. When I wanted to go into service and my mother said no, I said, "Come on, Mom, somebody got to finish this war." I used to kid her, you know, a teenage son and a mom. Somebody got to finish this war, Mom. Let me go over there and take care of this. I'll come on. I'll bring you a set of teacups from Hitler's table. And she said, "Are you crazy?" When we were in Dachau, when we were in Munich, and I was wearing my helmet like a good soldier with my rifle, we heard that 101st Airborne had taken Berchtesgaden. Berchtesgaden was Hitler's home. You see it in the papers all the time. Well, I never saw Berchtesgaden. What kind of war is this that they're hiding stuff? So we got somebody else. I got one of the German PWs who knew the territory to drive a Jeep. And 3 other guys and myself got into the Jeep and we went to visit Berchtesgaden, just visited. However, when we went there, the 101st Airborne was guarding that place like Fort Knox. And you ain't coming in here, boy. Right? This is an American soldier. I said, "Come on, we fought our way here. We didn't come here by taxi. Now all of a sudden I can't see. You know what?" And we argued with them. I'm proud of myself. 16, that's 17, 18. I don't have it. And we argued, a mean guy. And finally I said, what skin is it going to be off your ass if we come in and take a look around and walk out? And finally he said, "Yeah, but you keep your goddamn hands over anything." "Yes, sir." And I saw this. Sitting on the table, you know those square tables only that big. And I said, "Okay, we'll be right out." When we left, "Okay, sorry, thanks a lot." And I brought it home. When I brought it home, I said, "Ma, I brought you something. I brought you something from Hitler's table." She said, "What's that?" I said, "I took this off Hitler's table." She says, "From Hitler?" "From his table." "Take it out of the house." And she suddenly became that little old lady, screaming. She had sisters, family. So this has been under a bunch of stuff in my basement for years. Now, why do I have all of this stuff? When we took prisoners, we had to cut off my outfit. We had to take anything with a swastika off their uniform. Bearing in mind the story that I just told you, think about this. This is what every German army, that's Wehrmacht, not SS, or But this is what every German soldier wore on his belt. It says, God is with us. And it'll be here for you to look at. This is the soul book, the identification book that belonged to him. There's a lot of tchotchkes here. Yeah, I think I'm finished. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
But come up here and look at the tchotchkes.